A while back, I published an episode of this podcast called The Long Form Content Renaissance. And I truly feel like these days people are craving content with more nuance, depth, and longevity, thanks to just the fact that we are being fed so much short form content and we're creating and consuming it at a pace that feels almost uncanny, if I do say so myself. These days, it seems like everyone is a creator, and it's really important to think about which platforms you want to prioritize and how you can set yourself up for long term success. Substack is a platform that launched in 2017, but it really feels like in the last few years it has gotten into the conversation of platforms that creators really should prioritize and that they should be on. It goes a bit beyond social media for those who are looking to develop a deeper connection with their audience and really build a true community. So today we are going to be talking all about Substack. We're going to talk about who is currently using Substack, the monetization potential with Substack, the newsletters that I subscribe to on Substack that I'm obsessed with, and why I don't have one yet. And yes, I do have a full podcast episode's worth of thoughts on a platform that I don't even create for. So that should tell you everything you need to know about me if you don't know me already. But before we get into today's topic, let's do a little create and consume. Now, I'm recording this episode a little bit in advance so that you guys don't miss an episode while I'm away on vacation. At the time you're listening to this, I am somewhere in the Caribbean, hopefully soaking in the sun, reading a book, or walking around a beautiful Caribbean island. And you can go check out my Instagram for more real-time updates about my trip. And I did also just want to mention that I am not really wearing any makeup because I just got a facial and I want to give my skin like 24 to 48 hours to fully repair from the facial and not clog my pores or risk any irritation. I'm just wearing brow gel, mascara, and lip gloss, and I have to say, even this makes me feel more put together. So I should remember this for days where I feel more confident to actually skip my base layer of makeup. Okay, enough of that though. As far as what I've been creating this past week, I made a reel that I'm really proud of. I would love if you guys checked it out and let me know what you think. It is the sleek blowout recipe. I have shared it on Instagram and TikTok, and I'm going to schedule it on YouTube Shorts as well. Basically, I just feel like this is the type of content that I want to be creating more of lately, where I'm taking something kind of straightforward, like, okay, I want to film a blowout tutorial, but I'm putting a unique spin on it. I'm marketing it as the sleek blowout recipe to follow. And I feel like that is one of the marketing tactics that is really taking over right now. I've also seen people share recipes for other things that are not food related. And I went out of my way to create a cute font in Canva and export it as an overlay template and really make sure that I wrote out every single product that I was using so that hopefully it's super helpful for people. And I'm pretty happy with how it turned out and would definitely like to create more videos like this. As far as what I'm consuming this week, I inhaled, like literally swallowed whole, this book. I just read One Golden Summer by Carly Fortune. This has been on my list for quite a while. If you've listened to any of my reading episodes, you know that Carly Fortune is one of my favorite authors. And I always love the characters she creates. I always love her like romantic leads in each story. And I really feel like One Golden Summer is up there for me in terms of my favorites of hers. I think I started this book last Saturday and I finished it this past Tuesday. So it was a really, really quick read for me. I will say, if you have not read her first book, Every Summer After, I would read that before reading One Golden Summer because there are some spoilers for the first book. So even though this is the newer one, definitely read Every Summer After because if this isn't my favorite Carly Fortune book, that one probably is. And I just loved both of the main characters. I also loved all of the side characters. I didn't really feel like there was any extraneous plot details or anything like that. It was just truly the definition of a page turner for me. So I gave it 5 stars and I'm excited to discuss it with my book club next month. And as always, don't forget to let me know what you are creating and consuming as well. You can leave a comment if you're watching this episode on YouTube or if you're listening on Spotify. You can also DM us at Create and Consume Pod on Instagram. And with that being said, let's get into the topic of today's conversation. And let's start out by talking about what is Substack, because chances are, if you're listening to this podcast, you've heard of it before, but maybe you haven't taken the time to look into it more or think about what makes Substack newsletters different from other newsletters or other email marketing platforms. So to start out with, Substack is essentially an email newsletter platform. In terms of what makes Substack different from traditional email marketing platforms, I think the first thing is that everyone seems to have a really beautiful display homepage for their Substacks that are public facing, so you can see them without actually having to subscribe to the newsletters. But obviously, if you want to read the content, you would need to give your email address and become a subscriber. But they look quite a lot like blogs. They look like blog homepages, and we're going to talk more about blog versus Substack throughout this episode. But it's different from a newsletter platform like MailChimp or ConvertKit or Flowdesk because there's the implication that Substack really has more to do with storytelling at its core versus traditional email marketing, where you might be writing newsletters and, leading up to some pitch for something like watch this piece of content of mine or buy this product of mine or sign up for coaching with me. This is a little bit more earnest in marketing. And I actually think this is probably one of the best tools and tactics that brands and creators can be tapping into to build a sustainable business for the long term. And that's why I'm so fascinated by Substack. I am also happy that Substack seems to be investing very heavily in creators. So 6 months ago, they launched their Creator Accelerator Fund, where they are pledging $20 million to creators who move their subscribers from another paying platform to Substack. So the paid element of Substack is definitely something I want to talk about. Basically, for Substack, you can launch a free email newsletter. But what a lot of people do is launch a newsletter where you have to pay a small monthly fee to access the content. Or what they'll do is they'll launch the free version, and then for the paid version, they'll include additional content or more premium offers. So most Substacks that I'm aware of have different tiers to them. I have to say, I am a free subscriber of all the Substacks that I'm going to mention, and I still get a ton of value out of them. However, obviously, if I wanted more content and to unlock certain posts, I would then consider becoming a paid subscriber. And I will say, I think Substack does a pretty good job of facilitating organic discovery, where you can easily recommend other Substacks and creators in your own newsletter, and you can get inserted into the bottom of other people's newsletters. I just feel like it's a really great way for people to find you at a lot of different touch points, and it doesn't require as much pushing people to sign up for your Substack on Instagram or other platforms like you might be used to for a traditional email newsletter. Okay, so let's talk about how creators, founders, or anyone really can use Substack to build a community and to build know, like, and trust with their audiences. Because when I was really thinking about who is using Substack, obviously the first thing that came to mind is creators. And I follow all different types of people who have Substacks. A lot of writers and editors who maybe used to have staff positions and are now freelancing and are using Substack as a way to earn additional income or even just build up their credibility outside of the publication that they are most known for contributing to. I've noticed quite a few authors who use Substack, a couple of podcast hosts. So it really is a plethora of all different types of creators and influencers. And I think my favorite thing also is discovering an influencer who I follow who has a Substack, who I had no idea had one, and who I've gotten to know like on a totally different level through being a Substack subscriber of theirs compared to what I see on Instagram and TikTok. And I think that is just a testament to how much long form content really just gets you in with someone on a totally different level than the surface level of scrolling through like a 30-second video that they posted. Because half the time people don't even talk anymore. We've got AI voiceovers now. We've got songs to choose from just with the press of a button. Like, you don't have to come on social media and speak well and have a presence like that to build a following online. So when you see that someone can do the aesthetic stuff, but also has a lot to say and is really insightful and thoughtful with the stories that they choose to tell, that to me makes a creator feel really like the whole package. So I think that's a huge value add of Substack, and a big reason why, if you're a creator with something to say and you have a voice, you should totally consider creating one. Yeah, in my head, Substack is a creator first platform. However, as this happens, do you guys remember when brands were starting to sign up for Be Real? I gotta say, I am still on Be Real. I'm like one of the last people left, and the only other people left with me are my friend Miranda and sometimes my friend Artune. Maybe like once every 2 weeks he'll post. So that is extremely low maintenance, and at this point, it's kind of just a running joke. Like I'm gonna see how long I can keep being on Be Real, basically until someone kicks me off of it. But what I meant to say by that was, I remember the time when brands were starting to join Be Real, and I think that that is really interesting because it seems so obvious what a brand would do on Instagram. It seems so obvious what a brand does on TikTok or even YouTube. But when it comes to something like Be Real or Substack or kind of these newer platforms where brands are still looking for their footing and figuring out what to do, it's hard to not like just take it at face value and not put the brand spin on it, especially if you work in marketing and you have sales goals or impressions goals and things like that. It kind of gets tricky. However, there are brands who are using Substack. A couple who I did some research and saw were early adopters. I don't subscribe to any of these personally, but just to name a few, sorry, the Real Real. Why is that so hard for me to say? You guys probably are familiar with the Real Real. It is a resale website. Say, which is a beauty brand, has a Substack, and so does Tory Burch. And I feel like brands being on Substack is could be a good thing. I think that as long as brands approach Substack through the vision and the lens of storytelling and community building and authenticity, I know that is such a cringy buzzword sometimes, but like in all seriousness, I do think that is what helps because if Substack is just going to turn into another email marketing channel for brands, why would you create double the work for yourself on top of your original email marketing strategy? I really feel like this is the opportunity to fill in the gaps and do something different if you're a brand, to tell the story of visiting a location that inspired your latest launch. Like, let's say Fresh Beauty launched a Substack. They are known for their ingredient inspired beauty products. So they use rose bushes, they use raspberries, they use black tea, like all of those things. I would want their Substack to fill in the blanks for me of something like, here is how we source the black tea for our moisturizer, and here's a story about like the family who grows these herbs, who does this thing. Clearly, I don't know how tea is made as a coffee drinker, but you kind of get what I'm saying here. It can't just be like, here's a little bit of insight about the product and okay, here's a link to buy. It has to be like, no, genuinely, just if you were curious, here's the story of the family who, I don't know, owns the herb farm. How is tea made, actually? I feel so embarrassed right now that I have no idea what I'm talking about. I'm going to switch ingredients if that's okay with you guys. Let's say that there is a family that owns a strawberry farm and they have a strawberry whipped face wash. And instead of pitching the strawberry whipped face wash and being like, oh, here's one quick photo of where this was based, like I want a full interview with the owner of that farm. I want to hear about how it starts. I want to hear about what they do with irrigation and all of that stuff. Like put something like that in a Substack. Don't just make it, okay, here's one quick photo of a behind the scenes thing and shop the product. I feel like that is the difference, and that's what brands should be thinking about if they do choose to start a Substack, is to do it in a way that feels true to the platform and what it's meant to be. And I think that, again, on Instagram and TikTok, that already is what it is. It's already gone in a different direction. And we all know how brands show up on those platforms. But a brand that chooses to show up on Substack, I think, has the opportunity to be a leader in the space and tell interesting stories, like share more and make it a point to go deeper. The same way that I feel like some brands who now have podcasts have done successfully, this is kind of a similar trajectory or a similar route and a place to let people know more about what makes the brand special and not just like what's on sale this week. And I also saw a Forbes article that was talking about different founders who are using Substack. If I can find a link to it, I will make sure to include that in the show notes. Two names that just jumped out from brands I recognize are Diana Cohen, who is the founder of Crown Affair, which is a hair care brand, and then Lindsay Carter, who's the founder of Set Active, which is an athletic wear brand. They have also been embracing Substack as a platform, and I feel like this is actually probably the best way to do a brand on Substack because I want to hear founder stories, and it doesn't have to be like every single time, like how I built this company, how I built this company, how I built this company. Like, I want to hear about some of your early failures, or like, I want to hear about your grandma and why she inspires you. Like, again, if I am actually choosing to sign up for a Substack from a brand, which I have not done yet, it's not to say that now I don't know that these things exist. After doing some research for this podcast episode, maybe I will sign up for some of these, but I have not yet been motivated to, because I feel like some of the brands who are signing up for Substack, not the ones mentioned here, obviously, are again kind of like missing the point, or maybe they jump on it for a little bit and then they realize that, oh, it's a lot of extra work to create all of this content. And I want to talk about that from the creator perspective as well. And then maybe they abandon it or don't follow through on it or don't stay true to the vibe of what Substack actually is. And I think that that's another reason why, if you're on the brand side and you're considering starting a Substack, to think long and hard and make sure that it's something you can sustain. And honestly, I would probably make it free for like as long as possible if that is an option. And while I think maybe brands should keep their Substack free at first, I absolutely think that creators should feel free to turn on all the monetization options on Substack and bring in some additional income to your pie chart of yearly income. I think that diversifying revenue is something I have long championed as a creator, especially as a self-employed micro influencer. And this is another great avenue to do that through, especially because people are getting more and more familiar with the concept of subscribing to paid Substacks. So let's talk about some of the ways that you can actually monetize on Substack. The number one way that people monetize on Substack is through paid subscriptions. And think of this the same way that you would pay for an account with New York Magazine or the New York Times to kind of break the paywall and get behind to get access to all of the content. That is what Substack is for independent publishers. I think overall, most people will offer a free version of their newsletter and then also a paid version, as I talked about earlier, with the option to upgrade over time. And I want to talk a little bit about paid content because I think that in my head, there is a really obvious separation between what is free and what is paid, but I think that people have a little bit more creativity and wiggle room here than they might think that they do. The number one thing that I personally would expect if I was looking at the differences between a free Substack and a paid Substack is that I would get more posts if I chose to subscribe to the paid side of things. If I become a paid member of your Substack, let's say you charge $5 a month for it, I want to know exactly what I'm going to be getting for that $5 a month that the free subscribers are not getting. So say you want to send 4 email newsletters each month through Substack, I would make 2 of those free and then 2 of those paid so that your paid subscribers get to hear from you every week. Your free subscribers are only going to get that newsletter bi-monthly. So that is something that might make someone say, oh, okay, I kind of do want to hear from this person every week. I should become a paid subscriber. But I do think that you can also get a little bit creative with this paywall, because you have to understand that if you are putting things behind a paywall, you're going to be creating a little bit more work for yourself. Because if now you are writing 4 posts a month instead of the 2 that you would if it was a free newsletter, you want to make sure that the amount of money that you're going to be making from your paid subscribers helps cover the cost of that extra work or makes that extra work feel worth it, even if your subscribers are low in the beginning. Some other things you could put behind the paywall are bonus content or behind the scenes content. You could also potentially think about charging for early access. So maybe that means that people get your newsletter a week before the free subscribers do. I know there's a feature where you can read out your newsletter and kind of create like a mini podcast embedded in Substack. So getting access to the audio versions could also potentially be something behind a paywall. Or you could also do like live community events and Q&As and things like that behind a paywall too. I feel like that would be a great way to say, hey, like once a month I get on Zoom and just chat with all of my paying subscribers. Like that could even be an added bonus. And that doesn't necessarily require as much prep or thought as writing out a whole other newsletter, because Substacks are pretty substantial. Like a lot of the newsletters that I get take me at least 5 to 7 minutes to read, so much so to the point that in my Gmail, I actually now have a label. Whenever I see a Substack come in, I apply the label to that email so that whenever I have a little bit, I can sit down and go through all of the Substacks that I received that day. And I would say I'm subscribed to like maybe 20 plus Substacks at this point. All of that to say that having paid subscribers is the number one way people monetize on Substack. Now, if we're talking about a couple of other ways to monetize this audience on this totally different platform, I think affiliate links are a natural fit for a platform like Substack because you can include affiliate links where you will earn a commission if someone clicks through your link and makes a purchase all throughout your newsletter. And obviously, you want to make sure you're including a disclaimer per the FTC policy, especially hello if you're here in the United States of America. That's where I currently reside. And just make sure that you follow all your local laws in terms of disclosing content. Same for the next thing that I'm going to mention. But I feel like affiliates are so fun within a Substack, especially for people who I follow who share fashion and beauty content through their Substack. Like sometimes I am made aware of something extremely cute that I didn't know about before, or a sale that I didn't know was happening. And when it's told through the storytelling vibe and that lens of the writer, editor, author, podcaster, whoever it is whose Substack I'm subscribed to, it's just such a pleasant way to stumble upon good product recommendations. And I pretty much trust everyone who I'm subscribed to on Substack with product recommendations. So it also gives me incentive to click through those links to support them. And again, people are super used to links in email newsletters, but I think, again, the balance here and the trick is the same advice I was saying if a brand wanted to get on Substack earlier in this episode. I feel like it's less about like, okay, shop now, and more about like, oh, the other day I was walking along and I was clutching my Stanley tumbler, and like that I underline that in the middle of the story and link out there versus like, okay, here's a product image and here's a flashy shop now button. It's a lot more subtle and it's a lot more baked into the vibe and the story, if that makes sense. And I mean, I feel like I kind of do that throughout the podcast sometimes as well. As long as it's a natural fit and it doesn't disrupt the story, I think it's totally fine and fair to do stuff like that. And another way you can monetize Substack is through brand partnerships. And the way that I manage brand partnerships for my email newsletter, which again is not a Substack, we'll talk about that in a little bit, is to either offer them the chance for like a little sponsored banner or pop up so that as people scroll throughout the post and read throughout the post, they'll see a little ad banner pop up and interrupt the content. Or they can also do a dedicated newsletter where the entire newsletter is sponsored by that brand or product. Let's move along and talk about some pros and cons of paid subscription. And I do feel like those are the three main ways to monetize: through the paid subscribers, through affiliates, and through brand deals. And if I were a Substacker with a robust readership and a good click-through rate and all of that stuff, I would start thinking now about pitching brands for early next year and thinking about year-long partnerships where maybe the brand could sponsor like one newsletter a month. I feel like brands look for consistency like that in these email newsletter brand deals that they sign on to. And I feel like that would be a great way to introduce a new marketing channel to a brand, especially if they're a partner of yours that you've worked with on another platform before. That could be really interesting. Okay, I also wanted to talk a little bit about kind of some of the pros and cons of the paid subscription and membership models as an income stream, because this is something that I have dabbled in the past with my Patreon. I know I've talked about this on here before, but in case you're new or you don't know, I used to have a Patreon for 2.5 years. I believe I launched it in, was it early 2022? And then I closed it in spring of 2024. I believe that's the correct timeline. And essentially my Patreon was a content resource vault for content creators that got updated every month. So I had a $1 a month tier, a $3 a month tier, and a $5 a month tier. At the end of the day, I just couldn't scale the Patreon to what I would have wanted it to be to keep me excited about creating the content that I was going to be creating, and for the time that it took each month to actually create all of that exclusive content living within my Patreon. I do think that having a paid membership model and having access to a community who is so willing to support you like that can be an amazing income stream for content creators. For me, Patreon, I think, it was the right platform in a lot of ways for me, but it also didn't end up being the right platform for my audience in some ways too. So it's always something that I still have in the back of my mind. Like in the future, if I had a bigger audience or if I had more bandwidth to create and manage the content, it could be something that I could see adding back into my workflow. But for right now, I am confident in the decision that I made to close the Patreon at the time, basically like exactly what I was offering and for what I was charging for it. It just didn't end up being worth it to me. And I think I definitely gave it a fair shot. Like I gave it over 2 years to build up the momentum and see how things went. But at the end of the day, like it's definitely something I'm so glad I tried. And I feel like that is something that I would encourage content creators to think about for any new platform is to at least give it a try. You don't have to commit to it forever. If you really don't like it, you can always change things up. But I think that that is something to consider, especially if you've been thinking about starting a Substack or you're not sure like how it's going to fit into the rest of your content catalog and what you offer people. So that was a bit of a tangent, but when do we not have those on here? So to go back to talking about some of the pros and cons of like a paid membership model or paid subscriptions, I think obviously a big pro is that it becomes consistent income because if you have readers who are really dedicated, who enjoy what you're writing and who want to support you, whether that's with a free subscription where you can show off, how many subscribers you have, or with a paid subscription where they actually are like handing over cold hard cash to you. I obviously think that that's amazing. I do think that with membership content, you are likely going to have to create new content. I was obviously sharing some ways before where there might be a little bit of a workaround where you could share behind the scenes content or do an audio version of your content. So you're not creating that much more work for yourself. And ultimately, what I feel like it does come down to is really making sure that you deliver on what you've promised to your paid subscribers. And you have to make sure you're hitting that in terms of the frequency of content that you promised, but also the quality of content that you promised. And you might technically be putting out your content at the frequency that you promised, but if you're scrambling to write things or you're not getting things out on time, that's an easy way to lose trust with your paid subscribers. And that's like the last thing that I know a lot of people want to do, but it can be hard to balance and maintain all of this stuff. I will say that one great thing about Substack and something that I loved about Patreon was the ability to schedule out content. So you can definitely do that on Substack the way you can with any email newsletter provider. And one thing I actually used to do for Patreon, I'm not sure totally if this would translate perfectly to Substack, but maybe it's something to consider is for my lowest paying subscriber tier on Patreon, which was the $1 a month tier and the $3 a month tiers, what I would actually do was bulk create that content in December, like at the last 2 weeks of the year when brands were done for the year and there was nothing really to be done. I just like sat by the Christmas tree at my parents' house and typed up and created on Canva all of the graphics and templates and things that would be what the patrons would be getting for the entire year. And I would actually just schedule all of that out by month. So on January 1st, I already had the whole year of content scheduled out on Patreon for the $1 a month tier and the $3 a month tier. So the only thing I had to add to my workflow for my day to day for the rest of the year was to ensure that I was delivering on what I had in the $5 tier, which was an exclusive video tutorial and an exclusive resource each month. And that gave me the flexibility to jump in and be like, oh, okay, this month everyone's obsessed with these TikTok trends. So maybe it's like an editing tutorial for these TikTok trends. Or, oh, this month I launched a new digital product. So the resource that they're going to get is like my digital product tip sheet about how to brainstorm a good digital product idea. So that was something that was actually really helpful for me. If you are a writer and you write like personal essays and things like that, or you have a fashion Substack and you're looking for seasonal sales and all of that, those might be harder to plan in advance. So that's another thing to consider is how evergreen is your content? How much can you plan in advance? And how much time do you have in your current workflow to build in space to dedicate time each week to Substack and make sure that you are delivering on your promises for your paid subscribers? Because free subscribers have much lower stakes. If for all of the newsletters that I'm subscribed to right now, I'm a free subscriber. If I don't get someone's newsletter one week, it is not the end of the world. But if I'm paying for it and I was expecting to get a newsletter and then I don't, that's obviously a little frustrating. So that is the thing that I would be most considerate of if I were starting a Substack today. And I also wanted to walk through a couple of things to note about the power of email marketing in general, because maybe you're listening to this episode and you're like, you know, I am a social media person first and foremost. Like, I hear what you're saying about storytelling and things like that, but this sounds like a lot of work. And what guarantee do I have that if I invest the time into building a community of email subscribers, that that's really going to benefit me later on? Which is totally understandable. So I think the first big thing to mention is that email just has much higher click through rates and much higher conversion rates than social media. I feel like the numbers and the stats are changing all the time. I was looking up some numbers for this episode, but I couldn't really find anything consistent. The last one that I recall seeing when I last looked this up was that for every $1 spent on email marketing, you can get a return on your investment of $36. So that is something that I think is really substantial. And that's for traditional email marketing. That's just for like salesy stuff. That's not for like pieces written from the heart or like really thoughtful curated lists that you know someone spent hours on. So I think that is important to consider, especially in the world of swiping in social media right now. Like, whenever the algorithm's serving you stuff, you're just like boop, 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 boop. And every once in a while, you might say, oh, okay, tap, but you're not really in the mindset to shop or like leave the platform as much. You're probably going to be sucked in and want to stay there and continue to swipe and scroll as the algorithms have all magically pre-programmed our brains to do. Another great thing about email marketing is that I do feel like even in the world of Substack, where you want to focus on storytelling and community building and be less salesy, I do think that it is one of the strongest forms of lead generation still. So if you are a life coach and you want to use a Substack to ultimately book consulting clients, even just developing that know, like, and trust and getting people into your world of your Substack who later might choose independently on their own after spending time with you to book consulting sessions, I still think that is incredible. And even with traditional email marketing and, regular quote unquote email newsletters, you can also offer free content in exchange for an email address. You can offer a discount in exchange for an email address. When you give people something and they are so excited about what you're offering to give that they're willing to hand over their email for it, that is a signal that that's a person who might invest more later on. And Substack, I don't think, is the platform to set up like a welcome sequence, which you might be taught to do if you are a marketer or if you have an online course or online coaching or anything like that. I personally have a couple of those where I host my newsletter, which is Kit, formerly known as ConvertKit, and I have different welcome cycles and email opt-ins and sequences for when people download certain freebies to later pitch them on certain products. That is not what I would do on Substack whatsoever, but I do think Substack is still a great place to do your weekly content, connect with your audience, and then every once in a while, like, oh, hey, maybe you're having a free event, or maybe you are going to reopen your course. And at the very bottom, like every once in a while, you say, oh, by the way, like I'm going to reopen my course in a few weeks. And if you want early access, click here. Like, then that person can get opted into a different sequence of emails if they choose to. But you really have to pick and choose and sprinkle those moments in very lightly and very carefully. I would not personally do that more than like once a quarter if I had a Substack, I think. And another huge benefit of email lists in general is reaching your audience with no algorithm. These days, there's no telling where an algorithm is going to send you or what side of TikTok you're going to end up on, unless you're me and you're still on Love Island TikTok, even though the season ended quite a few days ago at this point. But that's beside the point. And I think that the great thing about having an email list is that you really do own that list. And I have heard of content creators who have had their Instagrams or TikToks suspended with like no warning and really for no reason. So again, to have this really dedicated group of your loyal subscribers who you can reach via email with no algorithm getting in the way, I think that is probably one of the most powerful things for content creators, especially if you're a micro influencer and you're not really finding the algorithm to be favoring your content and distributing it to the degree that you would like it to be. So that is a major benefit of email marketing. Okay, and let me tell you about some of my favorite Substacks to subscribe to. And I feel like we're kind of all across the board here, from fashion and travel to beauty and lifestyle, and even some art and home decor too. First up is Back Row by Amy Odell. I first met Amy when I was interning at Cosmo in college, and Amy now has gone on to write Anna the biography, and she has Gwyneth the biography coming out, I believe, later this year, which is super exciting. In her newsletter, Back Row, she brings a fearless fearless, honest outsider's viewpoint to fashion and culture coverage inspired by her time sitting in the back row at Fashion Week early on in her career as a fashion journalist. I love Amy's Substack. She also will do like retail diaries. She's talked to people who've worked for big luxury brands about their experience working in retail, like Hermes and Chanel. She also did interview me at one point for Back Row, which was honestly so exciting for me personally, as just a huge fan of her work. Okay, moving on to Book Enthusiast by Becca Freeman. So, Becca is one of the hosts of the Bad on Paper podcast. I know I've shouted them out a couple of times here on Create and Consume too, but I really do love the podcast. And Becca's also the author of The Christmas Orphans Club. On Book Enthusiast, her Substack, she shares book recommendations, personal essays, life updates, and roundups of things that interest her. Then we have Olivia's Substack by Olivia Mentor. Olivia is the other co-host of the Bad on Paper podcast. I met Olivia back when we were both working in editorial in New York City. Now she lives in upstate New York in a beautiful home that she and her husband are renovating. And she shares feelings, writing, reading, and what it means to live an intentional life on her Substack. I really, really love Olivia's personal essays, and I highly suggest checking out her Substack. Okay, next up is The B List by Bella Gerard. Bella is a friend of mine, again, who I met working in editorial in New York City. You'll probably sense a theme through a lot of these recommendations of editors turned creators or editors who are pursuing freelance opportunities. And Becca is an editor turned creator working in New York City, and on her Substack, she shares sartorial musings, industry hot takes, fun market roundups, and an unpretentious look into her life. And I love with Bella that she really like brings you along and gives you the insider access feeling with all of her content. Okay, next up is This Needs Hot Sauce by Abigail Koffler. And I find it surprising that Abigail and I have still not met in person yet, but we have been like online friends for quite a while. And her Substack is your place to find recipes, restaurant and product recommendations, and good reads. So she really does cover like food and lifestyle and all the things in between on her Substack, and I've really been enjoying it so far. Next up is Late Bloomer by Ellie Ayres. Ellie and I also met interning all the way back in 2014, I want to say. So I've known Ellie for 10 years now. She was working in branded content at Bustle for a while, but she recently left and is freelancing, figuring out what's next. And on her Substack, you can expect style inspo, travels around Brooklyn, New York, and beyond, as well as some lifestyle and wedding planning content as well. And can I just say, her Cape Cod bachelorette looked so dreamy, like Nancy Meyers' movie come to life. I absolutely loved that entire vibe and aesthetic. It was so cute. Okay, another one is Ahead of the Curb by Kirby Johnson. If you love diving deeper into the beauty world, how and why we consume, what trends will take off, and simultaneously enjoying beauty while holding a magnifying glass to the things that seem sus, this is for you. And Kirby did a great newsletter, I think like 2 weeks ago at this point, for which brand she thought should work with which Love Island contestants, and I think she hit the nail on the head. Another one is Pearl by Christina Rodolfo. Christina is also a former editor turned content creator, and she still edits and writes from time to time too. Pearl is her newsletter to share a more inclusive lens on Filipina beauty, but also share all of the knowledge she's gained from over a decade as a beauty reporter. And I love adding in different perspectives to things that I already love and am interested in. So it's been really great to be a subscriber of Christina's newsletter. Next up is '08 by Gabby Whiten. And Gabby is a creator friend of mine. I highly suggest checking out her YouTube channel as well. And '08 is an homage to print media of the late aughts and inspired by the nostalgic aesthetic of glossies, sharing the latest in fashion, beauty, music, film, and more. And for a long time, I thought Gabby's newsletter was called The Weekly, but I realized that The Weekly is what I get each week as a free subscriber. And she creates essentially a page of a magazine, and it's so cute and it's so well done and it's totally on brand for Gabby. And she basically creates like a mini magazine each week. So she puts it all together and the layout and everything looks like a page straight out of a magazine, but then it's also typed out like above and below the image. So it's really well done. It's a lot of fun, and I really recommend it. Another is Becca Land by my friend Becca Glasser Baker, and Becca shares NYC adventures, bookish content, fashion and beauty inspo, and life as a fangirl. She has also lately been recounting her trip to Japan, so I've been really enjoying that series too. Next, I have The M Sider by Emily Polner. Emily is another creator friend of mine who I met during New York Fashion Week. I want to say like mm, 8 or 9 years ago at this point, and Emily and I have been friends for a hot minute. And in the Emsider, you'll find Emily's extended thoughts on indie brands that she loves, secondhand fashion finds, fashion and beauty trends, and tips for leaning into your personal style. I also love the graphics that she creates for this newsletter, so much so that I like texted her about it one day and was like, I just want to say I love how you do the graphics for your newsletter because it's so different. And I feel like she always stays true to her own aesthetic. Okay, another one is Zelina Travel by Michelle Zelina. So I actually went to high school with Michelle, and she is the queen of all things aesthetic luxury. She is a mom of two, and she lives in upstate New York. In her newsletter, you can expect to read about luxury and boutique travel, fashion, motherhood, and lifestyle. Delana's Substack by Delana Suarez is a place where she keeps all of her curiosities organized and explored. And there's also fashion, lifestyle, and travel mixed in. And Delana talks about everything from like childhood inspiration, how she channels that into her fashion now, how different places inspire her fashion, movies, and things like that. So if you want to look at fashion through a lens of culture, I feel like her Substack is perfect for you. Another one is Check the Bag by Olivia Marcus. Olivia is a fellow Hoboken gal, and she is a writer and content creator. In her Substack, Check the Bag, she shares curated travel itineraries, fashion shopping lists and guides, and pieces of her home life in Hoboken. Another one is Nobody's Home by Sydney Gore. So Sydney and I worked together at Nylon almost a decade ago now, which is so crazy to say. And I've loved following along with her as she has kind of pivoted more into interiors writing and editing. So her newsletter has curated lists of interior design objects and trends, newsy stories, insightful conversations with people in the industry, and some of her musings and random thoughts as well, which are sometimes my favorite, I have to admit. And the last one that I wanted to mention is Glossed Over by Danny Cohen, although I think she is going to be rebranding to Danny Hardman because she just got married. So I will keep a link in the show notes either way. So hopefully you can find her newsletter. But Danny is a beauty journalist and expert bringing the industry's biggest news to your inbox in an easily digestible and thoughtful manner. She shares the good, the bad, the overfilled, and the uninspired. And I like getting like the beauty rundown from her each week. So I've really been enjoying her newsletter too. And now that that's all said and done, I want to address the elephant in the room, which is why I don't have a Substack, because clearly I think that there's value in the platform. I really feel like it's taking over, and it's one of those platforms that will hopefully stand the test of time and really help creators develop that deeper connection with their audience. I'm all for it. So why don't I have one? Number one, I do already have a free newsletter, so I will also include that in the show notes if you don't know about that and you'd like to subscribe. My free newsletter is hosted on Kit, and I basically do use it as a way to further explain the inspiration behind my content for the week and also let people know when I do have new weekly content published. So at the bottom of my newsletter is always a link to the latest YouTube video, blog post, and podcast episode that I've published. And I have a freebie opt in for my email newsletter called the Influencer Launchpad, which you can download for free. And then you opt in to my creator newsletter, which goes out every week when I publish new content. So I already have my little email list, which is great. I like knowing that I have that subscriber base already should anything ever happen to any of my social platforms. But the other thing is I also have a blog. And to be very honest, most of what I would include in a Substack is essentially what my blog posts are. And for me, I prefer the blog monetization method of having ads on my blog versus actually asking people to pay for subscriptions to access my content. I've just noticed that that works better for me over time. It's a lot less pressure for me. I can still make money without asking my audience to pay for content. And that's just something that I am personally most comfortable with. And I will also add a lot of the people who I just named who have Substacks now used to have blogs and took a lot of time away from the blogs to prioritize like Instagram and other platforms. So now Substack is kind of like an obvious place for them to go. I started my blog in 2012 and actually have never stopped blogging, although I'm in a bit of a lull right now. I really want to get back to regular blog posts on the site soon. But I've maintained my blog, and that's a different way that I monetize. So at this time, I don't know what content I would even create for my Substack because I have my email newsletter where I share like the creator behind the scenes. And then I have my blog where I share like the lifestyle in depth stuff that I want to talk about. So that is definitely probably the biggest thing holding me back. And also, as discussed, like I've tried the fan funded content model before, and I just found it to be putting a lot of pressure on myself. So it's not for me at this time, but I'm a big proponent of it. I'm excited to see like what else the Substack team releases and who else they can even get to create Substacks. I think that we are probably going to see more Substacks from celebrities, authors, notable public figures. I would love for someone from like Love Island to create a Substack. I feel like no one will. But I would be so curious to like read more from someone. And I'm also very passionate about just, preserving the English language and continuing to nurture our vocabulary and stretch those creative muscles as much as we can in a world of swipe culture. But I'm also just a girl, and sometimes we need our scroll time. And I feel like that's just a perfect summation of living life in the era of digital content. Well, I'm super grateful that you chose to join me today to talk all things Substack. I would love to hear from you and what your thoughts are. If you have a Substack that you think I would like, please tell me what it is. And until next time, I will talk to you in the next episode.